The dark truth behind Nathan West's return, a General Hospital conspiracy. The sterile corridors of General Hospital echoed with whispered doubts as Nathan West walked among them once more. 7 years had passed since Caesar Faison's bullet tore through his chest, 7 years since Maxie Jones had watched the life drain from her husband's eyes. Yet here he was, whole, healthy, impossibly alive. But something was wrong. Very wrong. Dr. Britt Westbourne knew the terrible secret from the moment she saw him. The man wearing Nathan's face was not her brother. Not entirely. The resurrection. When Nathan first appeared after the mysterious car accident, his return seemed nothing short of miraculous. The fingerprints matched. The DNA confirmed his identity. Even Anna Devane's forensic experts found no discrepancies. But Britt's horror-stricken face told a different story as she stood frozen in his hospital room, watching this familiar stranger smile with Nathan's mouth while something ancient and malevolent glinted behind his eyes. "You look like you've seen a ghost, sister," Nathan had said, and in that moment, Britt understood. The voice was wrong. The inflection carried decades of calculated cruelty that Nathan had never possessed. This was her father's cadence, her father's cold precision in every carefully chosen word. Caesar Faison had found a way to cheat death, and he'd chosen his own son as the vessel for his immortality. The truth was more horrifying than any nightmare Britt had endured in her father's shadow. For months, she had been held captive at the Five Poppies Resort in Croatia, forced to work on Professor Henry Dalton's experimental research. The project had seemed like cutting-edge medical science at first: consciousness transfer, neural mapping, memory preservation. Britt had believed she was helping develop treatments for degenerative brain diseases. She had no idea she was constructing her father's doorway to eternal life. Faison's final project. The technology was revolutionary and terrifying in equal measure. Using advanced neural interface technology and experimental brain mapping techniques, Faison had discovered a method to transfer his complete consciousness, memories, personality, and cognitive patterns into another living brain. The procedure required perfect genetic compatibility, which meant only his children qualified as suitable hosts. Nathan had been the target from the beginning. The golden child. The hero. The beloved detective who represented everything Faison had never been. Taking Nathan's body wasn't just about survival, it was the ultimate conquest, the final corruption of everything pure that Faison had ever touched. Before his supposed death in 2018, Faison had arranged everything meticulously. While Peter August, his other son, created chaos as a distraction in Port Charles, Faison underwent experimental procedures to preserve his consciousness in a state-of-the-art quantum neural network. When Nathan was shot, he didn't die. He was kept in a medically induced coma at a secret facility, his brain activity carefully maintained while Faison's team prepared for the transfer. Britt discovered the extent of her father's scheme only after it was too late to stop it. Dalton had been working on the consciousness transfer technology for years, funded by shadowy investors who saw potential military applications. Faison had infiltrated the project, redirected the research, and ultimately weaponized it for his own resurrection. The procedure took months of careful neural mapping and gradual integration. Nathan's consciousness was still there, trapped somewhere deep within his own mind, aware but unable to control his body as Faison's personality gradually overwrote his neural pathways. The process was incomplete when Nathan, or rather, Faison wearing Nathan's body, escaped the facility in the car crash that brought him to General Hospital. The blackmail begins. Britt tried to disappear after Faison's transfer was complete. She fled Croatia, hoping to lose herself somewhere her father could never find her. But Faison knew her too well. Within days, she received the message, cryptic coordinates leading to a dead drop containing photographs that made her blood run cold. Pictures of Maxie and James. Pictures of her mother Liesel. Pictures of everyone Britt had ever cared about, each one marked with precise details about their daily routines, their vulnerabilities, their fears. The message was clear: cooperate or watch them suffer. "You helped create me," Faison said when he finally called her, speaking through Nathan's mouth with that horrible familiar arrogance. "Now you'll help me maintain this existence, or I'll destroy everyone you love, starting with my own grandson." He demanded her silence first. Britt could tell no one about the transfer, about the abomination her father had become. Every conversation they had was monitored. Every person she encountered could be one of Faison's agents. He had planned for decades, building a network of loyal operatives who believed they were serving a cause greater than themselves. They didn't know they were simply pawns in one man's quest for immortality. The requests escalated quickly. Faison needed regular treatments to stabilize the consciousness transfer, medications to prevent neural rejection, procedures to reinforce the integration between his consciousness and Nathan's brain. Britt was one of the few people with both the medical expertise and access to the necessary equipment. Her father transformed her into his personal physician, forcing her to enable his continued existence in her brother's stolen body. The custody battle. But Faison wanted more than mere survival. He wanted Nathan's life, all of it. That meant claiming his son, James West, the grandson Faison had never known, the innocent child who had no idea his father was actually his grandfather wearing a human mask. The custody claim began with deceptive normalcy. Nathan approached Damien Spinelli with apparent reasonableness, expressing his desire to get to know the son he'd never held. He secured his old detective position back from Anna, claiming he needed to provide for James. To everyone watching, it seemed like a bereaved father trying to rebuild his shattered life. Only Britt knew the dark truth lurking beneath the performance. James is my legacy, Faison explained to Britt in one of their forced meetings. Through him, I can truly become Nathan West. I'll raise him as my own, shape him into the heir I always wanted. The perfect son I never had in any of you disappointments. The legal maneuvering was methodical. Faison, masquerading as Nathan, began documenting every interaction with James, building a case for increased custody. Spinelli had been a wonderful guardian, but he wasn't the biological father. When Maxie eventually emerged from her medically induced coma, she would want her son close, and Faison intended to be waiting. The devoted husband returned from death, ready to reunite their fractured family. Britt watched in agonized silence as her father manipulated everyone around him. He had Nathan's memories, the transfer had ensured that. He knew how to smile like Nathan, how to hold James with apparent tenderness, how to charm Anna and the PCPD with familiar warmth. But Britt could see the calculation behind every gesture, the predatory patience of a man who had spent decades perfecting the art of deception. Britt's impossible choice. The breaking point came when Faison formally filed for full custody of James. The legal paperwork arrived at Spinelli's residence like a death sentence, formal and terrifying in its implications. Spinelli, confused and hurt, reached out to Britt for answers. Why was Nathan doing this? Why was he trying to separate James from the only stable family he'd known? Britt couldn't tell him. Faison's threats hung over her like a sword. Reveal the truth, and James wouldn't be the only one in danger. Liesl had just returned to Port Charles. Any attempt to expose Faison would result in her mother's death. Faison had made that crystal clear. He had operatives everywhere, people who owed him favors or feared him enough to obey without question. You can't do this, Britt confronted her father in a rare moment of defiance, cornering him in his temporary housing. James deserves better than to be raised by a monster wearing his father's face. Nathan's face twisted into Faison's cruel smile. And who will stop me, daughter? You. The moment you speak, your mother dies. Maxie dies. And James. Well, children are so fragile, aren't they? So many tragic accidents waiting to happen. The threat broke something inside Britt. She had enabled her father's monstrousness before, but this was different. James was innocent in ways none of them had been. He deserved a chance at a life uncorrupted by Faison's poison. But how could she save him without sacrificing everyone else she loved? The signal. Everything changed the night Britt received the encrypted message. It came through on a burner phone she'd kept hidden from Faison's surveillance, a relic from her time in Croatia. The message was brief but electrifying, still alive. Held at Facility Omega 7. He has me but hasn't won yet. Need extraction. Nathan. Britt's hands shook as she read the words. The real Nathan was alive. Somewhere in Faison's network of black sites and experimental facilities, her actual brother still existed, trapped in whatever prison her father had designed to contain him. The consciousness transfer hadn't been complete after all. Faison had taken control, but Nathan's original consciousness persisted, locked away in a medically induced fugue state. The message had been sent from within the facility, smuggled out through a sympathetic orderly who'd grown disturbed by what he'd witnessed. Nathan had been aware for months, conscious but paralyzed, watching through neural interfaces as his body walked free while he remained imprisoned in darkness. He'd spent every moment of that imprisonment trying to find a way to signal for help, to reach anyone who might understand the truth. Britt accessed the coordinates embedded in the message. Facility Omega 7 was in upstate New York, disguised as a private psychiatric hospital. The location made horrible sense, close enough to Port Charles for Faison to maintain oversight, remote enough to avoid unwanted attention. Her father had probably visited the facility regularly, gloating to Nathan's imprisoned consciousness about every victory, every manipulation, every step closer to claiming James. The decision crystallized in that moment. Britt had lived her entire life in her father's shadow, enabling his cruelty through action and inaction alike. She'd helped him experiment on innocent people, had covered up his crimes, had betrayed everyone who'd ever shown her kindness. But this, stealing her brother's life, corrupting her nephew's future, this was where it had to end. The confrontation. The custody hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning. Faison had prepared meticulously, assembling character witnesses, documentation of his stable employment and housing, testimony about his bond with James. The boy himself had spoken excitedly about his dad, not understanding that the man he'd grown to trust was a predator wearing a familiar mask. Britt made her decision on Monday night. She couldn't save everyone, Faison's network was too extensive, his contingencies too well planned. But she could save Nathan. She could give her brother a chance to reclaim his life, to fight for his son from his own body rather than from a prison cell. Everything else would have to follow from that single act of defiance. She broke into Nathan's apartment using the codes she'd memorized during one of her forced consultations. Faison was out, probably meeting with his legal team to finalize the custody strategy. Britt had perhaps 2 hours before his return. She used the time to plant evidence, copies of Dalton's research, neural scans showing 2 distinct consciousness patterns in Nathan's brain, the encrypted message from Facility Omega-7. She left everything where Felicia or Anna would find it, knowing they had the resources and determination to follow the trail to its conclusion. Then she confronted her father. Faison returned to find Britt waiting in his apartment, her expression set with grim determination. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, daughter and father, victim and monster, 2 people bound by blood and broken by betrayal. "You can't have him," Britt said simply. "I won't let you destroy James the way you destroyed the rest of us." Nathan's face shifted, Faison's personality rising to full dominance. "You dare threaten me? After everything I've done to become this?" "I'm not threatening you, father. I'm telling you the truth. Nathan is alive. I know where you're keeping him. And as of tonight, so does the WSB, the PCPD, and everyone else you've been hiding from." The mask cracked. Faison's rage transformed Nathan's features into something inhuman, all pretense of warmth evaporating. "You've signed their death warrants. All of them." "Maybe," Britt acknowledged. "But I've also signed yours. You can't hide anymore. They know what you are, what you've done. And they're coming for both of you, the body you stole and the brother you imprisoned." The confrontation exploded into violence. Faison lunged at Britt with speed and precision that Nathan had never possessed, decades of combat training accessing Nathan's younger, stronger body. But Britt had prepared for this. She'd been her father's daughter long enough to understand how he thought, how he fought, how he killed. She defended herself with everything she had, years of resentment and guilt fueling her desperation. They crashed through Nathan's apartment, destroying furniture and shattering glass, each fighting for their vision of the future. Faison had the advantage of strength and experience. Britt had the advantage of nothing left to lose. The fight ended when Britt managed to inject her father with a powerful sedative, the same drug she'd developed for the consciousness transfer procedures. As Faison collapsed, Nathan's body falling like a puppet with cut strings, Britt made the call she'd been dreading. "Anna? It's Britt. I need to tell you about Nathan. And my father. And what I've done." The race to save Nathan. The raid on Facility Omega-7 happened at dawn. Anna coordinated with federal agents and WSB operatives, while Jason Morgan provided additional muscle for what promised to be a dangerous extraction. The facility was heavily guarded, staffed by Faison loyalists who'd rather destroy evidence than face prosecution. They found Nathan in a secure wing, his body sustained by life support while his consciousness remained trapped in an artificial neural interface. The technology was horrifying in its sophistication. Nathan was aware of everything, experiencing a constant feed of sensory data from the body Faison had stolen, but unable to move or speak or exert any control over his own existence. The extraction was delicate and dangerous. Disconnecting Nathan too quickly could kill him or cause permanent brain damage. But leaving him connected risked Faison's network discovering the raid and destroying everything. Dr. Terry Randolph, brought in as a neutral medical expert, supervised the procedure while federal agents secured the perimeter. Back in Port Charles, Britt sat in an interrogation room, detailing everything she knew about her father's consciousness transfer project. The evidence she'd compiled was damning: proof of illegal experimentation, documentation of Faison's network, the names of everyone who'd enabled his resurrection. She knew she'd face charges for her complicity. But she also knew that, for the first time in her life, she was choosing the right side, even if it came too late to erase her past mistakes. The ultimate price: the custody hearing never happened. Instead, Judge Rachel Carson presided over an emergency proceeding to determine the fate of both Nathans, the body walking free in Port Charles, currently sedated and under guard, and the consciousness trapped in upstate New York, fighting for survival. The medical ethics questions were unprecedented. Who had legal custody of James, the body that held his genetic material or the consciousness that held Nathan's memories and personality? Could Faison be held accountable for crimes committed in a stolen body? What would happen to Nathan if Faison's consciousness was forcibly removed from his brain? While lawyers and doctors debated the impossible questions, Britt faced her own reckoning. The moment she'd exposed her father's project, his contingencies had activated. Operatives across the globe received their final orders: eliminate the witnesses, destroy the evidence, make sure Caesar Faison's legacy survived even if his consciousness didn't. Liesl was the first target. The attack came in her apartment, quick and professional. Only the intervention of Jordan Ashford, who'd been assigned protective detail after Britt's revelations, saved her life. The assassin died in the firefight, but the message was clear: Faison's reach extended beyond his physical death, beyond his consciousness transfer, beyond any single body or lifetime. Maxie, still unconscious and vulnerable in her hospital room, received round-the-clock protection from Mac and Felicia. James was moved to a safe house, guarded by Dante and Chase. Everyone connected to the Nathan West identity became a potential target as Faison's network tried to clean up the loose ends their leader had left behind. Britt knew she had painted a target on her own back the moment she'd betrayed her father. But she'd made peace with that consequence. If dying meant James had a chance at a normal life, if it meant Nathan might reclaim his body and his future, then it was a price she could finally pay without regret. The final choice: the medical team at Facility Omega 7 stabilized Nathan's imprisoned consciousness enough for transport back to General Hospital. The technology required to sustain him was complex and experimental, but Dr. Terry and Dr. Lucas Jones worked around the clock to maintain the delicate balance. Nathan was aware, communicating through neural interface typing, desperate to see his son and reclaim his stolen life. Meanwhile, in a heavily guarded hospital room, the body he'd been stolen from lay sedated, Faison's consciousness temporarily suppressed by the same drugs that had facilitated the original transfer. The question everyone faced was stark and terrible: could they save one without destroying the other? Dr. Kevin Collins, brought in as a psychiatric consultant, examined the neural scans with growing concern. The integration is deeper than we thought, he explained to Anna and Britt. Faison's consciousness has intertwined with Nathan's neural pathways at a fundamental level. Simply suppressing it isn't a permanent solution; it will resurface, probably stronger than before. But forcibly removing it could kill Nathan, Britt finished. His brain has adapted to hosting two consciousness patterns. Removing one might collapse the whole structure. The choice fell to Nathan himself, or rather, to the consciousness that had been Nathan, still trapped in the facility's machinery. Through laborious neural interface typing, he dictated his wishes to Anna and Britt. Save my son. Whatever it costs. Even if it means I don't survive in my own body. James deserves a father who isn't a monster. Make sure Faison never touches him. The message broke Britt's heart. After everything she'd done to save him, Nathan was choosing to sacrifice himself anyway. But he was making the choice freely, on his own terms, for his son's protection. It was the most Nathan West decision possible: selfless, heroic, impossible. The resolution: the procedure to remove Faison's consciousness from Nathan's brain was unprecedented and dangerous. Dr. Terry warned that the survival rate was less than 30%, and even if Nathan's body survived, there was no guarantee his original consciousness could be successfully reintegrated. But Nathan, both versions of him, insisted it was the only option. Better to risk everything than allow Faison to wear his face and corrupt his son's future. The surgery took 14 hours. Britt watched from the observation gallery, flanked by Anna and Liesl, as the medical team carefully mapped and disrupted the neural connections Faison's consciousness had established. Every severed pathway risked permanent brain damage. Every moment of the procedure could be Nathan's last. When it was over, the body that had housed two consciousnesses lay still on the operating table, brain activity barely registering on the monitors. The team had successfully removed Faison's consciousness, dispersing it into random electrical patterns that would never cohere into awareness again. But Nathan's body showed minimal response to stimuli. The damage might be irreversible. They tried the reintegration procedure anyway, connecting the facility's equipment to Nathan's brain and attempting to restore his original consciousness to its rightful place. The process was agonizingly slow, watching neural pathways light up one by one as Nathan's memories, personality, and identity gradually downloaded back into the brain Faison had stolen. Britt held her mother's hand as they waited, both women silent with the weight of their family's legacy. The Westbournes and Faisons had caused so much suffering, corrupted so many lives, left so much destruction in their wake. If Nathan died because of her father's final scheme, Britt didn't know how she could live with that additional guilt. But then, miraculously, impossible, Nathan's eyes opened. His real eyes, with his real consciousness behind them, free of Faison's terrible presence. He looked confused, disoriented, struggling to process months of fragmented memories and trauma. But he was him again. Truly, completely, himself. The first word he spoke was James. Aftermath. Nathan West's recovery was slow and painful. The consciousness transfer and its reversal had left neurological damage that required months of physical therapy and cognitive rehabilitation. He had memories of things he'd never actually done, ghost impressions of Faison's actions in his body, experiences that felt real but belonged to someone else. The psychological trauma required intensive therapy with Dr. Kevin Collins. But he was alive. And he was himself. And most importantly, he was there for James. The custody battle resolved itself when DNA evidence and testimony confirmed that the man who'd filed for custody wasn't actually Nathan West, at least not the original Nathan West. The legal precedent set by the case would be debated for years, but the immediate ruling was clear: James would remain with his father, the real Nathan, once he was capable of resuming parental responsibilities. Britt faced prosecution for her role in Faison's experiments, but the court showed unexpected leniency. Her final actions, exposing her father, saving Nathan, helping dismantle Faison's entire operation, mitigated her earlier complicity. She received a suspended sentence contingent on continued cooperation with authorities and 5 years of probation. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a chance. Faison's consciousness was destroyed in the procedure, his final bid for immortality ending in digital dissolution. His network of operatives was systematically dismantled by the WSB and PCPD. Professor Dalton's consciousness transfer research was classified and locked away, the technology deemed too dangerous for continued development. The future Faison had tried to steal was finally, irrevocably, beyond his reach. A new beginning. 6 months after the final surgery, Nathan attended James's birthday party at Felicia and Mac's house. His physical recovery was nearly complete, though he still experienced occasional cognitive delays and memory issues. The psychological wounds would take longer to heal, perhaps forever. But he was there. He was present. He was Nathan West, not an imitation or a stolen shadow, but the genuine article, scarred but surviving. Maxie, recently emerged from her own medical crisis, stood beside him as James excitedly unwrapped presents. Their relationship was complicated now, laden with trauma and loss and the impossible horror of what had been done to them. But they were trying, taking it day by day, rebuilding trust one careful conversation at a time. Britt watched from the periphery, not quite welcomed into the celebration but not entirely excluded either. She'd saved her brother in the end, but she'd also enabled his torment for months before finding her courage. The family had forgiven her, or at least was trying to, but Britt hadn't forgiven herself. Perhaps she never would. As James's laughter filled the room, Britt felt a complex mixture of grief and relief. The Faison legacy had finally ended, not in triumph or glory, but in exposure and destruction. Caesar Faison's final project had failed. His bid for immortality had become his ultimate defeat. And for the first time in her life, Britt Westbourne was free of her father's shadow. The price of that freedom had been terrible. But watching Nathan hold his son, seeing genuine joy on her brother's face for the first time since his return, Britt knew it had been worth paying. Some legacies deserved to die. Some monsters needed to be defeated, even if the victory came at tremendous cost. Port Charles would carry the scars of Faison's final scheme for years to come. But it would survive, as it always had, finding ways to heal and grow and build new futures from the ashes of old traumas. Nathan West was proof of that resilience, brought back from death twice, surviving the impossible, reclaiming his life from the ultimate theft. His father had tried to become him. But in the end, Nathan had proven that identity was more than biology, more than neural patterns, more than the body you inhabited. It was choice. It was will. It was the determination to be yourself, even when everything conspired to erase you. Caesar Faison had learned that lesson too late. Nathan West had lived it, and survived.